911, what is your emergency?
Units respond code 3 to a 1050 on the highway. Vehicles are blocking multiple
We're en route
lanes
to the
of travel.
hospital. Patient is currently having
We've got a
cardiac
4-alarm
arrest and has
fire
been
here. Send
intubated.
additional
Protesters are
trucks.
outside of City Hall and they are not complying with our
Out
orders
on 1.
to
Hold the
disperse.
air.
In a rapidly changing world for first responders where it seems that every day the rules and norms are changing, there is one voice you can count on to give you the latest in emergency news. That is Lifeline. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Lifeline 911 Podcast with your host, Erica.
Hello.
I am your co-host, Gary, and today we are going to be discussing hanging up the Spurs, or rather, how to know when it's time to move along down the road. So, a lot of times in, 911 professions, it's difficult to know, like, when you've just had enough and when you need to move on. And I think a lot of that is because innately within everyone that does this profession, there's generally an underlying sense of sort of service to the community, of wanting to give back. And people that have that sense to them tend to sometimes get in past when they need to leave because they want to help, they want to give of themselves, but they get spent. And how do you know when you've reached that point?
I don't know. I think that's why we have this conversation, because we started just like with just about all of the episodes that we do, these topics come out of conversations that you and I are having just, as we're sitting across from each other at work, or, when we meet up in the break room, or just in passing, we're just sitting here talking about it. And that's how this one was born. I don't have a concrete answer. I mean, I don't think anybody can. I don't think there is a certain recipe, right? Or you fill out a quiz that says, okay, do you do this at the end of your shift? And these, you give yourself a number of points, and then by the time you're done, you add it all up, and it's time to go. I don't even know if there's anything out there, or is it a decision that you have to come to by yourself or within yourself? Does that make sense?
Yeah, we were kind of talking earlier about, people that, for instance, like they'll take a call that they may find very difficult, like an officer involved shooting call or something, and then they're like, I need the day to, I need a day off or a mental health day, which, yeah, that's understandable in a lot of ways, but also if you're doing that every time that there's some sort of a difficult call that comes through, this, it may not be that what you're doing is the best for you and ultimately for
Mm-hmm.
the community you're trying to serve.
Agreed. Because and I know that this is probably not just here in Austin. I'm sure it's all over the world, if you will, because the profession is pretty much the same just about wherever you go. There might be some differences geography wise and SOP wise and environment wise, but at the core, the job is the same. And you run into those difficult calls. And I feel like I think I mentioned it to you earlier. It's almost like we're almost like a receptacle. Is that right? Receptacle? Uh, like a trash can. And I know that sounds
Yeah,
terrible, but we go
we are
what
trash
follow me.
cans.
You
Okay.
and we're constantly taking in all of this negative, bad energy from, people's worst day when they either call 911, and I think they get the shorter end of that stick, if you will, because they are constantly taking in the yelling, the cursing, the anxiety, the stress, the fear that people are going through. And it is a constant dump over the course of a shift, right? So
hmm
over time, especially if you and to reach back to some of our episodes that we've done before, if you're not able to take care of yourself, or you don't have those tools, or you don't have those resources to help you take care of yourself, you're constantly taking in all of this negative energy and expending energy, by way of helping and doing your job every day. Where is the fill line? And I would imagine it would be hard to know where that is.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like it's and it's going to be different for every person, and there may be points in your life where if you say start this job early in your life, you may reach your fill line pretty quick, and then you may go away for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. We have lots of people that you know they leave working with us to do something completely different for a couple of years, and then they'll come back
Mhm.
and hopefully rejuvenated and feeling good about everything and ready to start
Mhm.
again, and their bucket might be able to have a lot more volume in it before it gets full. Uh,
Yeah.
and they might have better coping mechanisms or better ways to sort of uh, get rid of that negative energy. And I strongly agree with you that really for like the 911 call takers, that's where a lot like that's a lot of stuff to kind of process because you're hearing firsthand um, a lot of uh, unhappiness that's happening and a lot of
Mhm.
sorrow, and also, just to be quite frank, taking a lot of abuse from
Yeah.
the community.
Yeah. And and that abuse, most of the time, I would say probably a good 90, 95% of the time, it's not aimed at the 911 operator. It is just the way it is. It's the nature of the beast, for lack of a better way to put it. And I think it comes to a place where you have to decide how much more can you take. And especially if you've been doing it a many, many years. Like take myself, I've got 20 plus years, but I also had a period of time between relocating from the last agency back to Austin, right? So I had, I think, like 2 years or so in between. So that gave me a little bit of room to kind of decompress, to dump all of that. And I was able to do a few jobs. That's a whole other episode one day. A few jobs that were completely removed from public safety and emergency communications. So I was able to dump all of that so that by the time I was able to get back to Austin, I was ready. I was ready to jump back into service. I was ready to pick up that mantle, whether it be taking calls or dispatching or supervising or being a lead. I was ready to get back into this environment and everything that came with it. And I knew that. I knew exactly what I would be walking back into, and I was ready for it. But I can't
Hmm.
imagine if I had not had that break, where would I be?
Yeah, and you know, I think kind of as I was saying, like people in this profession tend to be very self-sacrificing a lot of times in
Hmm.
terms of
Yeah.
wanting to help other people at even the cost of themselves. But sometimes taking, a year or two off to kind of figure out who you are and to recenter yourself um, can give you so much more longevity in this career because you've been back here for um, 10
11.
years or how long have you, 11
Yeah.
years.
11. Hmm.
Yeah, and that's a long time to do the type of work that we do. And there are,
It
of course,
is.
people that do this job for 30, 40 years, um, but that's not everybody. And if
No.
you need a minute to unwind, uh, you shouldn't feel bad at all about needing that.
And I think and you're 100% right. I think and we're going to always, I think, over the course of these conversations, we're going to reach back to those taking care of yourself, knowing when you have reached a critical point, right? Because it becomes a question of, is this, if you reach a crisis moment, or if you reach that moment where you say, I have got to get out of here, what does that look like? Do you mean for the day? Or does it mean that day is happening more and more frequently? Is it every other day over the course of a 2-week period of time? Or is it over the course of a month? This is, even more often than that. Are you having more days where you feel like you are at the end of your rope than you are having where you are able to give more, or be able to maintain that same level of customer service, if you will, or community service?
Mhm.
And that's where it becomes. I think you have to ask yourself, if I'm having that many days, is it time?
Yeah, absolutely. Because you've got to understand that not only is forcing yourself to continue doing this if you're not in a good place bad for you, but it's, you know, could be life threatening for somebody on the other end of that radio or on the other end of that telephone because, you're not fully present, fully prepared.
Mhm.
In the last episode we talked about tort and like not, you know, entering calls or dispatching on calls just because you're like, screw it, I don't want to do it. Like
Yeah.
if you find yourself kind of feeling that way, you know, take a minute. And I would say for me, um, one thing that's helped me stay uh, in the job as long as I have is I have been fortunate enough to have the opportunity to do other things. Like I took 911 calls, I took non-emergency reports, I dispatched, I did training. I was the training coordinator. So um, I've had the chance to do a lot, which has kept me engaged. Um, but
Yeah.
not everybody is the same.
I find it so interesting that you mentioned whether or not you are, well, how did you put it? You were talking about whether it would be the difference between life and death for someone else, not so much yourself. And I was watching, I don't know, Grey's Anatomy just the other night, and there was an episode, and I'm going somewhere with this. There was an
Okay.
episode where the interns, or no, 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 I'm sorry, the residents, there was a flu going around the hospital. And,
Hmm.
these are, I think, first year residents, and they are all about, sticking with it. They're catching this bug, and they are, instead of acknowledging that they are not well enough to be there, they are like, I can't afford to miss the work. I can't afford to miss out on the surgeries. It's going to look bad to my superiors and to my colleagues if I bail out or if I bow out, right? Well,
Hmm.
the main resident instructor, if you will, asked one of them, he said, this is how you decide whether or not you need to go. Ask yourself, is my being here doing more harm than good?
That's yeah.
And
That's
that's how you
that's a
know.
good question.
I know, and I didn't have no idea that it was gonna be relevant today. I thought, "Well, man, that's a really good way to look at that." And I'm into the show right now. I'm not even thinking about work or even this episode at all because this topic had not come up. Because most people may not realize, but we really don't have, well, that's not true. We do have a running list of episodes we'd like to do, but most of the time when we come on air, for lack of a better way to put it, these episodes or these topics have come up over the course of a conversation that day. So,
Hmm.
right when you said that, my mind went back to that episode, and that doctor asked that resident, a person who is a caregiver like us in a lot of ways, just a little bit different, but they are in service to others. Their fitness for duty, if you will, it directly impacts someone else's outcome. And I think if you find
Yeah.
yourself as a first responder, whether you be a call taker, a dispatcher, um, a supervisor, even like the two of us, if we get to the point where our mindset is no longer that, where we are lifting up the people in our charge, it's time to ask that question. Is my
Mm-hmm.
being here
No,
doing more
yeah.
harm than good?
And I think it's important to kind of say we're not talking about like feeling tired at the end of the day because like you know to, recently we had some new software brought in to our center, and that's always a bit of a challenge to have that learning curve thrown in there to get the new software in. So
Yeah.
I think everybody the last week or two has been pretty exhausted, but we're talking about more than just like I've been running around all day and trying to answer questions. We're talking about sort of a tired that doesn't go away from sleeping. We're talking about,
Yeah.
you know, being either angry that you've got to go into work or that you're at work, being scared about, what's coming next on that phone line
Yeah.
or through those radio waves,
Wow.
um,
That's
being
good.
apathetic. Yeah. And
Hmm.
it's like all of these things that you've got to try and see in yourself that are really tough because um, it's hard to put a mirror to yourself, especially when you're doing the best that you can to try and help other people and just slowly exhausting yourself, depleting
Hmm.
yourself. It's hard to recognize that. Like there's a lot of pictures online of usually like I saw this one where this guy was like he was like drawn in like a stick figure and like he was like had a lot of like darkness in him, and then like he goes to pet a dog, and as he's petting the dog like the darkness kind of leaves him and he starts to feel brighter and brighter. And it's kind of like that I think, for you know 911 call takers, dispatchers. um how do you get that that angst, that sorrow, that darkness out of you?
Hmm. Yeah. Easy. I mean, it's easier said than done. And I think, yeah, trying to make that decision to hang up the headset or the Spurs, whatever you want to say, whatever object you want to put in there, you that's easier said than done because let's be real. If we're going to be completely real about this, this is also our livelihood where
Hmm.
there's a financial component, probably. There's a um, insurance, there's pension, there's all kinds of reasons why you stay. And we all would like to think that it's about the service to the community. And at its core, I believe that's true because you can't do what we do every day just for the money. Because I don't
You'd be
know
crazy.
anybody, please, I don't know anybody that is making what they are worth, what this job is truly worth. Even if you are in the top, what is that, the 75 percentile of earners in this industry, even if that's where you are, you're still not making what you're worth. You're still not making enough for this to be worth what we take in every day. So there's always, there's other factors to consider when you decide have even if you know mentally and emotional and even sometimes physically you have had enough and there's just not much more you're going to be able to give. How do you how do you prepare to walk away? That's probably a whole other episode in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think we could probably touch upon it here because, as you were saying, like if if it's the money that motivates you, or uh, the pension or the insurance or what any of that, you can find that better elsewhere. Um, and not saying that you're going to live a life of poverty. Hopefully not.
Right.
Taking 911 calls, but
Mhm.
if like if it's money that motivates you, this is not the right job because
Right.
there's better ways to do that. But if it's that sense of service to the community, that is, what can keep you there in the long run. And I think you'll start to notice, like, going back to the premise, when it's time to hang up the headset is when you're no longer feeling like it is uplifting to you. When you
Mm.
when you hate the people that are calling in for help, when you don't care about them. And I'm not talking
Ooh,
about,
well said.
yeah, I'm not talking about, like, crying with them on the phone, but if you don't care about, like, whether these people live or die, and I know that
Mhm.
can sound like extreme to someone who maybe just started, but you'll see people that are like, I, don't care one way or the other. I'm just doing this for a paycheck. And that that way happiness does not lie.
Agreed. Well said. And actually, here's another way to look at it. And I'm gonna go back to Grey's Anatomy again. It's one of my
Okay?
favorite shows. What happens when you like when you're watching that show, there's almost always at some point there is an older doctor or surgeon that has passed his or her prime and they just won't let go. The passion is still there. The want to is still there. They can still physically get there and come and do, they can do most of the job, right? They can practice medicine, but they are not as sharp as they used to be. And they're making mistakes. And it's not because they it's not because they don't care and it's not because they don't have the skills, but their body, their mind and their hands or the tools are just not as sharp as they used to be. If you
Hmm.
find that you are no longer able, let me flip it a little bit. So say you're the 911 operator or you're the dispatcher and your radio ear is your way of life, right? That's one of the tools of your trade that you can't do without. You are now becoming a hazard because you don't hear as well. You've been able to mask it, kind of, just because you've been doing it a long time, right? But you know that physically, medically speaking, even, you are not where you should be. Is it time to consider to hang it up, or do you hang in there, or do you continue, even though you know you're not physically where you should be?
Yeah, that's a good point because when we had kind of discussed this episode, I hadn't really thought about my mind kind of went more to uh the internal factors, like you're tired of it, you don't want to do it. But yeah, physically, like, it's a demanding job. Like, there are nights that you have to work, there are weekends, there are holidays, there's mandatory. Um, there's, you're gonna work with people that, might be kind of sick, but they have to come into work because if they don't, somebody else
Hmm.
is gonna get tagged. Um,
Yeah,
and it's a physically demanding job even though it doesn't sound like it to sit for 8, 10, 12 hours, being emotionally berated, and hearing
yeah.
horrible things, it takes a physical toll on you. So that is also, that's a good point, that you need to be cognizant of, am I up to doing the job as well?
Am I physically able to continue, or am I physically in a place where I can still meet the demands of the job? If if you have developed over time arthritis to the point where your typing speed or skills are not where they should be, is it is it right to stay when you know that you cannot give everything that you should be able to give? We know you want to, but if you know that you can't, is it right to stay? Is it Or
Yeah,
would you stay because you don't know what else you can do, which is probably a whole other episode by itself because funny funny enough, there are other professions that branch out from this one. You can consult, you can do there are other things you can teach. in this environment, though not necessarily in a call center. So I think when I say that, I just really mean this is not a simple topic. It's not
No.
black and white. It's not black and white because
Yeah,
that
I
could
mean,
be, you know what? Honestly, that could be one of us one day.
yeah. I feel like it's becoming me very soon.
Oh, hush,
Just
please.
the aches and
You're not even
the
40.
pains of
I don't even
getting
want to hear
old.
it. Oh, whatever. You're not even
But no, like
40.
ask yourself, ask yourself, would you want to get on an airplane with a pilot who maybe isn't as sharp as they once used to be?
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of similar to that. Do you want to get in a taxi with a driver who's not as quick as they once were? You know, it's
Oh, yeah. That's
knowing.
suffering with that's got cataracts and their eyes are going dimmer and dimmer, but they have, they for whatever reason they just are not able to part with the profession. And I'm not
Mhm.
digging on anybody that may have a medical reason, but these are questions that you have to ask yourself because it could literally be
Mhm.
me tomorrow, or it could be you. It could be a medical
Yep.
thing that comes up out of nowhere. It could be a mental health
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, and like, are you, as you said, uh being here, is that helping or hurting more? Um
Hmm.
because if the physical things, maybe not so much, but the emotional and mental aspects of it, uh as we said earlier, like sometimes it's good to leave just to recharge and find your purpose again and then come back. Um
Yeah.
but if you stay too long and make a mistake, you might not be able to come back to the profession if something, you know, God forbid, horrible happens. You
Yeah.
know, that's a lot for you to carry, knowing that somebody, you know, a family might not be complete because you weren't um fully present in your job.
Yeah. And like you said, the mental and emotional most likely will be the culprit before it becomes the physical, right? And I know this
Mhm.
is not as upbeat. I feel like we've said this over the last couple of episodes, but these are things that you don't often hear, especially around our water coolers, for lack of a better way to put it. You don't hear these conversations happening very often. And Hollywood doesn't touch on this. I've never seen an episode.
Yeah.
Have you?
I haven't, but we figured if you've made it this deep into the podcast, 32 episodes, like, we started with what makes a good, call taker and dispatcher, and like how to, like, the challenges of that. But if you've made it this far, then, as you like to say, Erica, we like to be real with people. So these are
Absolutely.
real considerations that you can have in your career, and they may be a year in, they may be 35 years in, you may never have them, but it's something that is a good conversation to have, I think, because you want to be aware of them and know that it is okay to hang up your headset if you need to leave. There's no shame
Yeah.
in that. There's no guilt in
Mhm.
that. There's
Nope.
there's no dropping the ball. Like I remember
Mm.
uh in 2020, when our center started to really have really high attrition and our numbers were dropping, our staffing numbers were dropping, and it was
Ugh.
really really hard to hire people. Um,
Yeah.
we lost some good people that found other jobs that they wanted to pursue, and several of them came up to me and they said, like, I feel really bad about leaving right now, and I told each of them, I was like, don't feel bad. You've served your community. You've helped people. Take the advantages, the options, the opportunities that are coming, and there's nothing to feel bad about if it's your time to go.
Absolutely. And what I love to tell people, and I've had those conversations because we were there together, and I had more than my fair share of those conversations. And one thing I tried to remember to say to as many of them as I could is the beauty of this profession is you will learn things about how to help people and about yourself that you can take with you anywhere. There are skills that you
Mm-hmm.
will learn in this profession, problem solving at an elite level, the ability to think on your feet, the knowledge that everything is not an emergency or what really is one versus what really isn't one. Those are things that you can take with you out into another profession or just out into your life moving forward that you may not get anywhere else but this profession or something similar to it. But if nothing else, I mean,
Yeah.
the ability to problem solve on a dime at an elite level, I'm sorry, I'm biased. I don't think you can get it quite like you can here doing this work.
Yeah. And if you can sit on a 911 phone line for 16 hours while you were tagged for mandatory and have people just screaming obscenities at you for all that time, and not lose your cool, that's a pretty good
Man,
sign to me that like you've got excellent emotional control.
ain't that the truth? And I'm sure that there's probably some companies out there in this world that would love to have a conversation with you just because
Mm-hmm. Yes.
you can't buy that kind of self-control and you can't teach it. You can't teach
Yeah.
it. There's
It,
something
it
to be said about sitting on the phone with someone for who knows how long while they're contemplating ending their life. And when it's over and you hang up the phone, they say thank you, or you hear the responders on the other end of that phone tag you out because now that person is safe. And it's a direct result of your skills and your effort and your time and your willingness to give of yourself. So if you have done your service, you really have done your service. You've paid your dues, all whatever, any of the cliches you want to throw out there. But more than anything, you've done your service. There is no shame whatsoever in saying, I've done my time. It's okay to go.
Well, on that happy note, I think it's going to be okay for us to go as well.
I agreed.
Uh, that was a real happy episode. Okay, does everybody feel happy and good? Okay.
Oh, well, you know
Um,
what? Sometimes it's not. Well, come on. These are our colleagues. And if they're not our colleagues, they are contemplating it or they know someone or they're a family member of someone. And it's not all gumdrops and, skipping through the tulips in this environment. Sometimes we get really, really deep. It's where we
mhm,
live, Gary.
that's true. And we also want you guys to know that we really appreciate you all listening to us. We enjoy hearing your feedback on what you think about the show. That you agreed with this or you didn't agree with that. Um, and as you know, we have a email box, lifeline911podcast@gmail.com, for questions to be sent in. But if you're also interested in maybe coming on the show and talking about a topic that's interesting to you, we would love to have you. It's
Absolutely.
pretty pretty easy to get on. Like one of the reasons, like we were talking about earlier, is we want this show to be sort of a discussion on our industry, our profession, and help other people that may be having the questions about something that you have a really good answer on or a solution on. So, uh, you know, we we're here to help facilitate a conversation, and we would love your help to do that.
Absolutely. We welcome any and all inquiries to hit us up and we will get back to you for sure. We enjoy talking with our colleagues. We do this every day, all day. We have these deep discussions, sometimes just Gary and I, but we have those conversations with our other colleagues and they're just close. We would love to hear from people from all over this great land of ours and in this profession. So take him at his word when he says that we'd love nothing more than to have other guests on, people to give their perspective, share their knowledge. It would be amazing.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that'll be our show for today. We really appreciate all of you listening out there. And from all of us at Lifeline 911 Podcast, I'm Gary,
America.
and we will see you next week.
Thank you for watching our production of Lifeline 911 Podcast. If you have any questions about the topics we discussed today, or if there's something specific you'd like us to cover in a future episode, send us your questions at lifeline911podcast@gmail.com. Stay safe out there. Until next time, this is Lifeline 911 signing off.